An Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francois de Sales. Book 1, Chapter 3. Devotion is suitable to all sorts of vocations and professions. In the creation, God commanded the plants to bring forth their fruits, each one according to its kind. Even so, He commands all Christians, who are living plants of the Church, to bring forth their fruits of devotion, each one according to his quality and vocation. Devotion ought to be differently exercised by the prince, by the gentleman, by the tradesman, by the servant, by the widow, by the maid, and by the married person. And not only so, but the practice also of devotion must be accommodated to the health, the capacity, the employment, and the obligations of each one in particular. For I ask you, would it be fit for a bishop to be as retired as a Carthusian monk? And if the married people should store up no more than Capuchin beggar monks, if the tradesman should be all day in church like a monk, and the religious were continually exposed to all exterior exercises of charity for the service of his neighbor, just like the bishop, would not this devotion be ridiculous, preposterous, and unsupportable? This fault, nevertheless, happens very often, and the world, which does not or will not discern any difference between real devotion and the indiscretion of those who pretend to be devout, blames and murmurs at it, which cannot remedy such disorders. No, Philothea, devotion prejudices nothing when it is true, but rather it makes all things perfect. And when it is not suitable to the lawful vocation of any person, then without doubt it is not safe. The bee, says Aristotle, draws honey from flowers without hurting them, leaving them as whole and fresh as it found them. But true devotion goes yet farther, for it does not injure any calling or employment, but, on the contrary, adorns and beautifies all. They say all sorts of precious stones cast into honey become more glittering, each one according to its color. And all persons become more acceptable in their vocation when they join devotion to it. The care of the family is thereby rendered less burdensome, the love of the husband and wife more sincere, the service to the prince more faithful, and all sorts of business easier and more supportable. It is an error, or rather a heresy, to endeavor to banish a devout life from the camps of soldiers, the shops of tradesmen, the courts of princes, or the business of married people. It is true, Philothea, that devotion, merely contemplative, monastical, and religious, cannot be exercised in these vocations. But besides these three sorts of devotion, there are many others proper to make those perfect who live in secular conditions. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, David, Job, Tobias, Sarah, Rebekah, and Judith, all bear witness to this in the Old Testament. In the New, St. Joseph, Lydia, and St. Crispin were perfectly devout in their shops. St. Anne, St. Martha, St. Monica, Aquila, and Priscilla in their families. St. Cornelius, St. Sebastian, St. Maurice in the wars. Constantine, Helena, St. Louis, St. Anne, and St. Edward on their thrones. No, it has happened that many have lost perfection in solitude, which, notwithstanding, is so much to be desired for perfection, and yet have preserved it in society which seems so little favorable to it. St. Gregory says that Lot, who was so chaste in the city, sinned against chastity in solitude. Wherever we are, we may, and we ought, aspire to a perfect life. End of chapter 3 of book 1.